All right, I guess it's that time again. It is week 3 of the Tennis Parent Tuesdays. Today we're talking about mental toughness and how to create mental resiliency with your child. My name's Duey Evans. I refer to myself as the performance architect. I am a former tennis coach. I'm no longer on court. I spent 35 years coaching kids as high as, never coached anybody who finished number 1 in the country, but I finished as high as 2 in the country, and took someone from first ball to gold ball, and coached somebody who went on and won the NCAAs, and pros up to about 200 in the world. But I'm not doing that anymore. Now I'm just sharing everything I know with you, doing a little bit of consulting and working on some other stuff. But every Tuesday night I'm here, and I'm here for you to share what I know with you. So we're going to kind of jump in. Each week I hope, we got somebody in with us. Hello, Miss Amber. You're muted. She's looking for the unmute button on Zoom. But we have somebody, so we're going to have a discussion tonight. We're going to go through a bit. You're there. Good. Welcome. Welcome. I'm good. Just jumping in, and what the format's going to kind of be is I'm going to share some stuff, but if at any time, since it's just you and me and whoever's watching on YouTube, but they're not jumping in the chat, if you come up with something that you want to kind of share, then just kind of pop in. And I will probably repeat the question because I don't know as I have it set up to... Oh, no. Yeah. No worries. So as I said, the theme for the night is the mistakes you're making after every loss. And so talking about losses probably tonight more than wins. I suspect that there's probably a whole nother discussion to be had of, are you doing the right thing after somebody wins? But tonight we're just going to be talking about losses. Yeah, it is for everybody. Just so you know, most of the time I'm going to be hiding behind the screen and talking, just so that people be able to see what's up there. And so the scene that we all know, when we see the kid coming off the court, and you can just tell that they lost right away. They're not happy, and what do? We jump in and we want to save them because we've been doing it since they were little kids. So they fell down and bumped their head, and we said, "Oh, baby, it's going to be all right." And you kissed their forehead, and you did all those things to make them feel better. And unfortunately, that's a habit that worked great, but it doesn't work in terms of building resilient and mentally strong kids. So that in bold, we're teaching them that losses don't contain valuable information, and they really do. Long time ago, I used to say that I didn't meet one who wasn't more willing to do the work after a loss than after they won a tournament. They win a tournament and they think they know it all, and there's no telling them anything. So I think that we got to make sure that we figure out how do we teach them from those. And so when they come off the court, the walk that nobody talks about. And as I was developing this presentation, this actually got left out, and I had to go back and I had to put it in because it was like, well, get your kid to talk and do all these things. But the reality is that they need some space, that they're not always ready to go. And so something that I've said to kids for a very, very long time is there's going to be all these people, and they're going to be telling you good match, good try, good whatever, and you got to just keep your head up and keep walking, go by, nod, don't even have to speak to them, keep going. If you have to go to the tournament desk, report the scores, go do that. But then head out the door Go find a tree. Go find a back seat of a car. If you feel so bad about it that you want to cry, cry. Like, yeah, you got to care. You got to care. I think we don't want kids who don't care. And if they do, that's probably a problem in and of itself, that they don't care enough. They're probably doing it for somebody else rather than themselves. And so, yeah, there's kind of a fine line between caring enough and caring too much and not caring at all, right? The not caring at all will tend to be tanking, and the caring too much tends to be choking. And it's kind of hard to tell which one is which. Did you have a question while we're going? Otherwise I'll just keep going. Emotional first aid versus real resilience. So what do most parents do? Soothe the pain away. And do you want some ice cream? That might be one. Although sometimes that's good parenting rather than trying to harp on the bad things all the time. But you want to help them feel better quickly is generally the one. While not in these slides, I think that the worst thing that we can do after a kid finishes a match is call a grandparent, right? Because what's the first thing that the grandparent says? And the only thing the grandparent cares about, like, did you win or did you lose? And they don't even say, did you lose? They just say, did you win? And that sends a message. Sometimes kids can kind of see through that because they recognize it's grandparent and that's all. That's who they are. They're just somebody who wants the good stuff for them. And then, want to move on to the next thing. Okay, next match. But, it says on the other side of the slide, the true resilience, what builds lasting strength, emotional recovery plus learning. So you got to recover, but you got to learn. So extract patterns and insights, transform pain into information. And I think that what we always want to do is to come back having learned something from every single solitary match. And the bottom slide, difference between, the bottom of the slide, the difference between recovery and resilience is the difference between feeling better and getting better. Both matter, but only one creates competitive advantage. There we go. It's interesting how what we phrase really has a great bearing on what we get out of it. So almost the exact same questions. But, there's the grandma question of, did you win? Or and then the kid saying, well, why can't I win? I can't tell you how many times I've heard that one, or what's wrong with me, or the one that often happens in the middle of a match that we could talk about. It's not really in today's presentation, but the kid who's on the court and says, I can't make a forehand, and they're winning 3-2, right? So they've always obviously made it. I actually pulled a kid off the court in the quarterfinals of boys 12 clay courts. He was 11, but that's what he was saying. He was up, I don't know what he was up, 5-2, 5-3, and he's melting down on the court, literally crying and saying he can't make a forehand. And I'm like, you're making lots of forehands. But we had gone through, this was a long-standing thing, and he didn't figure it out until his senior year of college. Well, he figured it out some, but he really figured it out his senior year of college, and he won the NCAAs his senior year at University of Virginia. And he was already great at 11. He just had that challenge that was in front of him. But kids question themselves and they start asking, why aren't I good enough? And what we need to do is to get them to start asking the questions of what happened in the match. And one of the things that I used pretty effectively with a couple of kids was when I wasn't at the match and they would call me on the phone after the match. My goal was to talk about the match in such a way that after maybe a 10-minute conversation and we were getting ready to hang up, I would be like, so did you win or not? Because I just really didn't know, because the conversation had been about all of the other things. And in a couple of cases, I had actually assumed the player had lost when indeed they had won. But because we came to that kind of a dialogue situation where we were talking about what happened in the match rather than what was the outcome of the match. So talking about, patterns, and what were the patterns that you saw that keep appearing over and over and over again? Did the kid pin you in the backhand corner to the point where you weren't recovering anymore, and then he would expose and move you to your forehand corner? Or was he, windshield wiping you back and forth across the court, and then all of a sudden would go behind you when you were no longer being honest and split stepping, you were just running from corner to corner? Or what types of things were you seeing in the match? And then that kind of, what I think is one of the big questions for an almost real-time situation is, what would I do differently if I got a chance to go back out on the court and play this kid tomorrow or later today, or we're dealing in hypotheticals, so but sometime like almost immediately, what would I do different? What were my takeaways that I have some impact on and could do differently? And then the final one, and the one probably to take back to the coach, are what are the specific things that I need to work on? And I think coaches maybe they don't even ask for great data, but they certainly don't get great data, and they get a lot of reactionary things from players, and double faulted a lot of times. And what might be better information is I double faulted and got myself behind love 30 in too many of my service games, and then I served better, but I had already dug myself a hole too deep and I couldn't come all the way out of it. Or I struggled with my first serve in the ad court, or whatever those are things that can look very specifically and go to work tactically on how to make some changes. Why reflection matters. And these are just kind of some psychological things that's been proven, that immediately after that your memory is sharp. And that's why, extemporaneous notes taken immediately are actually admissible in court, where your memory isn't necessarily, if you write it down a week later, it's not necessarily, because memory is that bad. And I wish I had that statistic of how much, when you go to a seminar, how much you retain after a day, a week, or whatever, but it drops precipitously over time. And then, a few hours later, emotion begins replacing memory. And so, those specific things that happen start becoming more of a blur. The whole thing blurs together. You think about things like a really long point that happened, and the long point probably had very little bearing on the match, because the reality is 75% of points go 4 shots or less at every level of tennis. But you think about those ones that were 12 shots, and they become memorable because everybody around starts saying good point, and they're clapping and all of those things. So that one gets kind of cemented in the memory. And so you think, oh, I got to win those rallies, when the reality is you can almost throw those rallies away, or those points away, because they probably didn't have a big bearing on it. And then once you get to the next day, I played scared becomes the story. The actual tactical breakdown gets lost for forever. Hard to kind of remember what you did. Your brain does some stuff overnight. It files things in long-term memory, but it doesn't necessarily file the details there. So you want to be kind of still operating in short-term memory, which happens within a few hours, which is interesting, because I will talk about and I think it's a little bit later, but where if I say to kids at the end of a tournament, and I have the same spiel, and every kid that I've coached knows that at the end of the tournament, I say, go be a kid, go spend time with your family. We'll talk about it when we get back on the court, and you can actually do something about it. Don't sit and dwell on it for forever. But reality is some of it you do need to take in, make notes of in real time. Don't have to do anything about it. You don't have to dwell on it, but it's pretty good to kind of make note of what happened. So week later, there's no data. If we haven't talked about it a week later, I'm not sure that we're really on this competitive track anyways, right? So you've had a lesson, you've had drills, you've had whatever it is, and if you're really operating at the competitive level, you've had all sorts of things. You might have had sports psychologists and physios and all sorts of stuff that you've interacted with in a week, unless it's time to go into active rest. So it's the end of a training block and it's time to go to the beach for a few days. So the critical window, 30 minutes to 2 hours, that, I think that depending on where we are in a tournament, how quick to process these things changes from time to time. If I got a match in an hour, I came off, I had a long match, the other player's been waiting, we're already past the time, so they're giving me extra time, and they're like, how much time do you need? Or you're at a tournament and they won't give you any more than the hour that you get. You got to go through that cycle of walk to the parking lot, get it out of you, smash a racket. No, I'm not going to say smash a racket, but well, whatever it takes, throw your bag in the pond, and get back at it pretty quick. I'm only saying things that I've seen, so I've seen all of those things. So the three big questions: what did I learn about my opponent? And one of the things that I would suggest is making notes during the match and after the match, right? So at Austin Tennis Academy, where I do a bunch of work, not as a coach anymore, they have something they call match cards, and every kid has to write a match card, and they go out with it, and it's one of the things that I'm trying to do. When I ran my own program, which I did for tons of years, you had to have a notebook, and you did the same sort of thing. What are my performance goals for this? Not really outcome goals. And so then during changeovers, you would make notes and change what's going on. So what happened over these past two games? What did I do that worked? What did my opponent do? Is it my turn, right? Because we kind of switch back and forth of one person figures out something, and now it's the ball's in the other person's court, and so now it's their turn to counter and figure out what's going on. So making notes of, did my opponent change something? Are they doing the same thing? Have they not figured out what it is that I'm doing, so therefore I'm going to keep doing it? I figured out something, but I'm not using it yet because I need to kind of set up a diversion of sorts in order to be able to get to it, so I'm saving it for a big moment. Those are the kinds of notes that you can make for yourself in real time. And then after the match, smartest person I ever coached, little girl by the name of Teresa Wang, and she's not a little girl anymore. She's a pediatric cardiologist having, so gone to med school at Duke and matched to UPenn Medical System. So, but when she was a kid, and she was a smart kid, she was valedictorian of her IB program that had 500 kids in it, but at 12 years old, she was making notebooks. And so she had a lesson notebook, and she had, and I can probably come back and talk to you for a second. So she had, good. So she had two notebooks, and one was her lesson notebook, and one was her match notebook. And so in her lesson notebook, she had created partitions where she had notes on all of her different strokes and what would go wrong, or when they were going wrong, what were the things to look at to make changes that she could then use that on the court during a match. And then she had one that she used after matches, that she made notes on every single match that she played in real time, while we're trying to talk about this extemporaneous kind of match taking. Well, we were at a tournament one time, and another girl in our program, Lisa asked Teresa how to play a girl. And Teresa said, well, she does this, this, and this. But when I get back to the hotel, I'll look in my notebook and I'll tell you what my notes were. She goes back to the hotel, she looks at her notes, and lo and behold, what she remembered was absolutely different than what she had written in real time. So she calls up Lisa and she says, what I told you was wrong. Forget all about it. That here's what she actually did in the match. And, that worked because they played similar games. So kind of what would work for Teresa probably worked for Lisa. There's some other stories where you don't want to listen to somebody else, but I won't get sidetracked too much. I want to get through this presentation. But so that's one of the things that I suggest, is making notes for forever. I think if you do it well and you do it for long enough over junior tennis, you could just now take AI and feed all of your notes in, and you could write a book on tennis if you do it, because your journey will have been that deep. So that's my suggestion. So, sorry, I had to go bye-bye again. So what patterns kept showing up? I think I touched on that a little bit. But, ones talk about here, I went for too much on second serves, or I played passive when nervous. I think that's a bigger one, playing not to lose, rather than I went for too much on second. I almost advocate somebody making sure that you're going for it. Second serves, because, swinging faster is more important when you're counting on spin. So maybe going for it too much would be hitting it a little too flat, or having a second serve, what Sasha Zverev was doing at one point in time when he was struggling with his serve, which was just hitting two first serves. And then if I played him again, kind of back to the same refrain that we had at the previous slide, what would I do different? And I think I'm a big advocate of teaching from a tactical perspective, right? So there's teaching technique first and then tactics after. So essentially, we're giving a kid a tool, but we're not giving them how to use it. So, here's how to hit a forehand, and then they think, well, a forehand is a forehand is a forehand, but because we didn't give them a manual for how to use it, and as opposed to here's my roll, here's my loop, here's my drive, here's my inside out. So I think getting them to learn skills and teaching it from a tactical perspective gives them the manual for how to use it, as opposed to, okay, I need a saw because I'm building a mantelpiece or a staircase, and okay, I have a chainsaw in my bag, so I guess I'm going to use the chainsaw to build the staircase or the mantelpiece, right, as opposed to the coping saw or whatever the other fine kind of saws that you have are. Right. And so I think it's important for us to teach from a tactical perspective. What are we using and what are we doing? And then I think that comes from asking some of those questions when we get to the end. So, keep them pinned deep with my forehand. Don't let them establish pattern. I think that the best players I've ever seen, it's only once have I took somebody from hitting their very first ball to winning a gold ball. I did, and that's probably my proudest moment, but it was because she was the little sister of somebody in my program. At that point in time, I didn't work with kind of beginner kids, and so that was something that I was very proud of. It is mostly, I guess it would be 11 to 13-year-olds who were already pretty good. Top 100 in the country. I was coaching kids, top 10 in the country. And so kids whose parents wanted them to be like some of the kids that I was coaching. what I would ask very first day is, how do you win and how do you lose? And to see if they actually knew that. Do you have that in your head? I got fortunate. I got asked to coach a young lady who grew up in Charlotte area, where I was coaching, by the name of Duey Evans. And Duey was really good. She won girls 18 clays, singles and doubles when she was 15, semis of junior U.S. Open, like really good. I asked her very first day, how do you win? And she's like, real simple. And she was two hands on both sides. I watched her out hit Sharapova in practice. She said, I rip ground strokes into the corners. When I see that they're going to play defensive and throw the ball up, I move up towards the service line and hit a swing volley to win the point. Like, she understood her game that clearly. And when she wasn't doing that, she didn't feel like she was winning. And so I think it's important to have an understanding of your own game in pretty finite terms. That's what I advocate anyways. So winning and losing versus learning. And just so you know, I am not an advocate. I don't even know what the opposite of advocate is, but that thing of winning isn't everything. I am much more a Vince Lombardi. Show me the person who said winning isn't everything, and I'll show you a loser. That I've operated under that coaching philosophy for a long time. I'm now older. I'm a grandparent. I feed chocolate cake for breakfast. So I'm not that. I'm not that person anymore. But I'm definitely not this, like lose forward or whatever that saying is. I think we want to win. We always go out trying to win. We want to pull out all the tools that we have within the rules in order to win. I also, just to let you know, I went to West Point and lived under an honor code, and like, I'm not about cheating at all. I'm also not one of those people that whines about cheating in junior tennis, because there are any number of other things a player could have done that would have changed the match much more than the 4 or 5 or even 8 points that somebody took from you, when what they really took from you was your mental fortitude, and now you're thinking about the fact that you're getting cheated. So what does it look like? How do kids learn? How do they systematically extract the lessons from the losses so that they feel like there's some value in them? Not that we want them to go in saying, geez, I'm going to lose so I can learn. Yeah, thanks, coach. So no, but how do you make sure that from every match that you're extracting something that then informs your training sessions, the next ones? I started this series 2 weeks ago with talking about developmental plans, and I think it's important to have a plan and to have training blocks. And so where are you in that periodization schedule? And when you're in competition, last week we talked about tournaments too. So are you at a place that you're playing a lower level tournament? So what you're trying out is what you're doing is you're trying out new things, or are you at that middle level where you're playing most of your matches and so it's really competitive, or are you at the highest level that you could play? So it might be a kid playing in L4 that plays mostly 5s and 6s. It could be playing L1s if you play mostly 4s and every once in a while a 3 and a 2. If you're a top national kid, it could be playing some low-level pro events or ITF events. And so whatever that highest level is, where what you're trying to do is to get a new awareness of standards and what do I do that wins at a lower level and doesn't work at all against people at a higher level, right? So if you understand what you were hoping to get out of that tournament, then you can know what lessons to extract from it. So if you're playing that tier 1 where that's your highest level. It's what does work. Oh, wow. I found out that something actually worked against the highest level. One of my best friends in tennis is a coach in Scotland, and he talked about the fact that they didn't know that Andy Murray was good until he won the 12 and under Orange Bowl, because he was just playing tournaments, and he was winning, but he didn't know they hadn't been out on the world stage or whatever. So that was all of a sudden the highest level. And then he realized, okay, what I do works even at this high level at 12 years old. So, now I need to search for more competition. And that's when he actually, excuse me, decided to go to Spain and train with Pato Alvarez. But if you're playing that lowest level and you're trying stuff out, you can look and you can say, was this good enough so that I can now train something else, or so that I can maybe use it against my top competition? I remember when I first moved to North Carolina in 2000, and Southern section is huge, so it makes Texas look tiny. It is 9 states. It goes all the way from Arkansas to North Carolina, down through Georgia, and then back across to Louisiana. It's huge. Up Kentucky, Arkansas. It's 9 states. To where when I moved to Georgia in '93, they said if Georgia was going to secede from the Southern section, that it would be by itself the 3rd largest section in the country, and Southern would still be the biggest. Southern was that much bigger player-wise than everywhere else. Well, after I moved, we were at this tournament, and I ran into a girl that I knew from Georgia when I moved to North Carolina, named Lindsay Burdett. And Lindsay ended up playing one of the middle of 3 sisters who all played at Stanford. But I was asking Lindsay about her match, and she said, I won 3-3. And this was the first day. And I was like, what happened? She said nothing happened. I was working on stuff that I know I'm going to need in the semis and finals, and I wasn't really concerned about it. I was just trying some stuff out, knowing that I could go back and use my A game and make sure I pulled out the match in order to get to the next round. So she was definitely getting information back. That was her whole goal in those matches, was to get information. And I don't know if it was a systematic type thing, though knowing the coach that she had, it probably was. And so how do we extract information all the time? Like, do you have a son or a daughter playing, or both? Or a son? Okay. How old? Okay. So a 14-year-old boy. And what level does he generally play at? Oh, you're here with us in Texas. Ah, gotcha. I hope I run into you at some point in time. So, yeah, so do you live up that way? Oh, wow, and you traveled all the way to Frisco. Ah, so traveling. So was that for an L4? Okay. So just looking to see different players? Okay, good. Well, sounds like you have a plan and you're interested. You took an hour out of your evening to sit here and listen to me talk. What specifically do you do at this point in time in terms of mental training, mental resiliency, is he pretty strong mentally, or I don't know, I okay. Mhm. Which is interesting. I find that phrase of playing not to lose to be interesting in and of itself, because it's not what he's doing. He just has a bad sense of what it takes to win, right? So he's trying his very best, and nerves are undoubtedly taking over at that point in time. And the first thing that happens when we get nervous is we stop breathing. When we stop breathing, and then our feet stop. And so making sure that we're exhaling all the time as we're swinging, that we're consciously doing something with our feet between points, or just before a point starts, all of those things to remind ourselves. It's one of those places where I've often told kids, your very first set point, I want you to come into the net, because the one thing that that does is it makes sure that you move your feet, so that your tendency to get tight, and if you're a boy and if people are saying you have a grown man serve, that needs to be a part of your game anyways, particularly if you want to play college tennis. You need to be able to come in and play in the forecourt. Um, wow. Me too. Me too. I'm 6'4" and I have, yeah, big. So lots of jokes from people of, oh, you can just wear the boxes and stuff like that. um, well, I suggest that he have goals on that side as much as anything else. So he goes into a competition saying, "Here's what I want to do." From that side, if we were to look at the four performance pillars being technical, tactical, psychological, and physical, and so having a goal in a major one and at least one other one. You don't need to have lots of goals. I think, like, keep them small and manageable. But I would say if that's one of the things that he's struggling with, then that's one of the goals to have and to measure against, so that he can look at the end of at a match and say, how did I do? How can I rate myself relative to that? At 14, he's old enough to be able to think of things in a way that he could use a number grade, so like a 1 through 10 type thing. When they're a little bit younger, they don't get that scale, so you got to kind of put it in words. And, oh, I was pretty good with that. Oh, I didn't do it so much when I was nervous, or things like that. But at 14, almost 15, then he should be able to kind of grade himself out on a scale of 1 to 10, how he did versus that. One of the things that you can do as parent is to chart him on things that he's trying to do. And it might, if you get nervous at all, and I don't know either one of you, but I know my friends told me that having kids play was going to be the hardest thing in the world. And I was like, no, you don't understand. Because I was somebody put my sunglasses on and I would sit and I would watch matches and I would make the lesson plan for the next however many weeks, and it was good. And my own kids started playing, and it started with my oldest at 4 years old when she played soccer, and she was the one that would pull up the dandelions while the ball went by. Everybody else playing beehive, and she's playing. And very first soccer game, I'll never forget this, is we were walking to the car and I have her hand, my little 4-year-old, and I'm berating her and I'm telling her that we're going to the hospital on the way home and having a blood test because she can't be my child, because no child of mine would ever be that non-competitive. And then as my older ones were my younger ones were playing tennis competitively, I would be texting back to the tennis center and totally redesigning my program every match that they played. That is just right. So the hardest thing is to watch your own kids struggle at something, but you can create a chart to on a real simple one that I advocate, and I wish I had a telestrator, but which is it's 5 columns, and it's CDIEW, and the first 2 are the decision-making columns. So whatever you're working on, could he have done it? Did he do it? And so if you breaks down and you have an X in one of those columns, then you're now working on decision-making. The right 3 columns are, was it in? Was it effective? And did he win? And so if it breaks down in one of those are the execution columns. So if you're getting good performance and he's making good decisions, but it's breaking down and execute, well, now we know what we're actually working on. When a lot of times people will be working on the execution side when it's absolutely a decision side. Right, so coming in at all the wrong times, or not coming in at all the opportunity times, or whatever that happens to be. So that's a simple one. There are lots of charts that you can create, and there are lots of apps that you can get with stuff. That's just a simple one that you can make on a piece of paper to keep track of it. So, and on the mental side, did do things like, did he go through his ritual? You could make checks and X's on that one a lot. Yeah, right. So lots of things. He's 14. How long has he been playing? Okay. So tennis wise, he's a baby. He's new to it. Um, did he come from playing other sports? Ah. Mm-hmm. No. Well, it's there. Sports have gone crazy, and Texas is crazy for sports. So, um, it's the one I chose over all others when I got to college and had to make the choice that In 1979, I figured it was going to be easier attracting girls being the star of the Army Navy football game than it was to be a tennis player, right? So yes, I had my own, long time ago. So that is just about it. So kind of parents' job description. So to help, right? How do you help? How do you ask good questions? How do you be somewhat Socratic but don't feel like you're. It's interesting because I'm doing something that is creating a way to help people learn. And so we're talking about Socratic things. And so I created an AI that acted like Socrates. And it was the most annoying thing in the world because it wouldn't stop asking me questions. I could never get to a conclusion. So, yeah. But so you don't want to be that who's constantly probing, but I think ask analytical questions. So replace how did you feel with what did you notice? And replace it's okay with what would you try differently. So just little bits of stuff. Then see what he gives you back. Is hopefully he's someone who is pretty open with you. You're in a great spot, I will tell you, because I've had more than a handful of parents tell me in different words, but that if you had told me what this was going to be before we got into it, I never would have done it. But having done it, I wouldn't trade it for the world. Because you get to spend weekends with your kid during a time when lots of parents are complaining that their kid stays in their room and doesn't want to talk to them, and you're spending it at tournaments and you're seeing each other at some of your best and your worst moments. So, it's so have fun with it. Have fun with it. I miss it. So, yeah, it is. What do you find is the hardest thing? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Good for you. I mean, really good for you because there's roles that you can play that are better served by not knowing. At Austin Tennis Academy, at the moment, one of the top boys is a kid by the name of William McEwen, and William just won two ITFs in Mexico. Then he won one in the U.S. In Dallas, and then got to the finals and won out in Carville. Um, I have his parents on video. We created a video for Austin Tennis Academy 4 years ago, 5 years ago, about families that had multiple kids in the program. And so we sat and we interviewed them. And it's in the video that they don't know anything about tennis. That wasn't the. But now Jennifer, the mom, does a lot in terms of researching the tournaments and figuring out the draws and doing like which ones will he get into? Is this one where most people play the back draw versus right? So that's a great role for you. And at the same time you're the captains of team whatever your son's name is, that you are responsible for making the decisions. When he changes coaches, he might have some say in it, but ultimately it's your decision. Um, and how much you're spending on privates versus what, like, that's your decision. And you take the lead from a coach, and but ultimately it's you're the captain of your team. And I think the most important thing to do is to set what the standards are that your family has, right? So how are you going to behave representing our family? And so just kind of what are those limits of totally unacceptable? And I wouldn't dare to try to set those for somebody else's family. I mean, I think you see it if you play this long enough, you will see that there are people from various regions of the world that don't have the same Judeo-Christian values that we have, and they treat the sport very differently. Um, and that's just because that's their value system. And so you have yours, and that's the one that hopefully your son plays by and lives up to. So, um, yeah, it gets a little bit. L514s are both the largest, well, it is the largest group of kids always. And so there's the widest variety of personalities and families, and because the draws are just huge, right? So if we have an L5 at ATA, it will have, I don't know what Brian done, probably as many as 5 draws, as many courts as he can get. He will let kids, and he can fill almost everything all the time. Um, so you get a wide range when you get that many people. It's like, but it's learning, and yeah, you're still at a place where you're running into new kids because he's climbing his way up, and so there are those that have been doing this for 4 or 5 years competitively, and so they're already playing L4s as their tier 3s, and then playing, you know, L2s. There was a bunch of L2s this past weekend. There was one in Houston actually. We had a couple of kids that I spend some time dealing with them as a family, dealing with them, not like they're a problem, but from Mexico that were there playing. Um, so I love those kids to death. Um, so, but you'll run into some new people each time you take a step up. And undoubtedly, one of the challenges that he'll have is feeling like he does or doesn't belong. So all of a sudden he's playing L4s, and these are kids that are used to playing L4s, and they all know each other, and they have their little cliques, and you hear them talking about who are you playing, and oh, I'm playing Bill, and everybody knows who Bill is, and you don't have a clue who Bill is. And so what is that all about? And so figuring out strategies for how you're going to handle those things, and that's where depending on, I don't know if you're in a large program or what that's like, or how many kids the coach that you work with has, but talking to the parents of those that are a little bit ahead of you in the process, they're your best resource, right? They relate as parents, which is very different than we relate as coaches. So. Uh, well, I will tell you that for me, this has never been about tennis. This has always been about the things that you come away with from tennis. And so, yeah. Um, so dealing with hard people is one of the biggest challenges we all face throughout our lives. So dealing with them at a young age and coming up with strategies is not necessarily a losing thing. It's probably a winning strategy. Let's see what's on my last slide. Oh, I can come out of that one. Just join us every Tuesday. Um, yeah, here every Tuesday at 8 o'clock, and I will be here whether anybody comes or not. That's my goal, and I will have something. So what you will see is posts like I put out. So what I'm generally doing is my Tuesday blog post, which I then share on Parenting Aces and some of my own stuff sites, is all about whatever I'm going to be doing this about that evening. So I think it gives parents a chance to think about it a little bit, maybe go through what I already wrote and um, have some questions because I love questions. And so I guess I should open it now. Like, do you have any that I can? No? Yeah. Well, sounds like he's a gamer, and that's not a bad thing to be. That having someone that wants to give it their all and isn't going to give up and will learn the difference between, am I going to do more damage to myself if I continue doing this so I'm injured versus I'm just hurt? Because there's a lot of hurt that goes on in being an athlete, right? So sprained ankles that you're recovering from, or shoulder that's a little sore, or what he may go through. Well, if he's 6 feet tall, he might have already gone through it, but Osgood slaughters and a lot of other things that he go through. Um, so well, that uh, well, had you stayed in gymnastics, there would be more of it. So just so you know, he would be in an individual sport. But yeah, my cousin is an all-American gymnast at University of Illinois, but he was captain at Nebraska. So he's actually kids now. He's in his sixth year of eligibility. Um, so, but he's hoping for the Olympics in LA. So but the injuries are never ending. So. Right. Well, actually, Sam is the biggest So Sam was tiny, and he is now 6 foot, might be 6'1". He grew out of nowhere. He didn't grow until sophomore year in college. So he was probably 5, 6 going into sophomore year in college, and then all of a sudden he is by far the tallest person. When I've gone to a couple of his gymnastics meets, he's huge. Back to your question though, I would set the expectation for your son that there's going to be a discussion that happens that you're going to give him if he needs a little bit of time to himself, that he's free to have that. And you get used to asking, do you want to talk now or do you need a few minutes? But that says, okay, you're going to talk. You're not escaping this by going away. And then kind of coming up with what that routine is. And once he recognizes what it is and you've fallen into it, it'll come pretty naturally. And he will start thinking in real time in ways that he's preparing for that conversation, which is going to come after, which is what you're really trying to do through this whole post-match thing, is you're trying to get them to look in real time and come up with solutions and have them be conscious decisions, not like, did you realize the kid was left-handed? No, I didn't know that. I'm I'm left-handed, and I can't tell you how many kids didn't realize that until they've been taking lessons for months. And yeah. Yep, except you can't do that in real time, but you can take a notebook and a pencil out with you and take notes as you're going. Um, and I think that's, and that could be something too. Like write down your bad thoughts and then discard them. Right? Yeah. I could see that. It's not something that I've ever experienced or tried to do, but or heard of. But I could see that being what somebody might have as a strategy of, yep, that give them a place. Different different people have different things. At ATA, they have something that was taught to the program by a guy by the name of Dr. Jim Valverde, and so they're called Goldens. And then so it is about basically clearing your mind and controlling your breathing. And um, there's probably the top sports psychologist for tennis ever was a guy by the name of Dr. Jim Lair. And he had something called the 16-second cure. And so it is a routine that you can go through in a 16-second. And I'm sure if you just Google AI, whatever, Jim Lair 16-second cure, um, that those are the places to start. If he's working with somebody, then they probably have their own. On my YouTube channel, actually my personal YouTube channel, I have one that I did with Ty Kwiatkowski that unfortunately YouTube made me change the music because it was copyrighted. So but it kind of breaks down what are you doing, what's he doing at certain times. So immediately after the point's over, racket to non-dominant hand, acknowledging what just happened. If it was a good point, little fist pump. If not, and then turning away and walking in semicircles. And there, but there's a method to it. And I think having the method is more important than what the method is. Um, if you get deep into it, yeah, but if you get deep into it, you can get to where you're processing what happened before or what do you want to happen next. You can hang hooks around the court where, as you're walking, as you approach the fence, on the fence is hanging like your performance goal. So did I move my feet or whatever? So you hit the fence and like it triggers that because you've hung those hooks at different places around the court. So as you move around the court, you can pick up things that you've left there. Um, that that's advanced. Um, yeah, yeah. That's the same kind of thing. Having a system, believing in your system. Um, my big one has a lot to do with being positive, having positive things that you're doing, not trying not to do negatives. Right? So if I know that there's a purple dinosaur behind me, I can't say, don't think about the purple dinosaur behind you. Don't think about the purple dinosaur, because the more I do that, the more I'm thinking about the purple dinosaur behind me. Right? So I've now got to figure out, okay, but there's an orange elephant over there in the corner, in the other corner. So let's think about the orange elephant. Um, so, right? So you don't want to fixate on trying not to think about a negative. Find something positive and go there. Um, yeah, yeah. It's fun. There, there are a lot of rabbit holes to dive into and squirrels to chase. So, um, mm, not necessarily. Give yourself a little credit. That you probably have good instincts, because the one thing I bet is you know your kid better than anybody else. So, and that was it for this week's Tennis Parent Tuesday. I'm Duey Evans, the performance architect, and until next week, well, just keep the balls up in the air. And actually, there's three balls that come in a can, and you can learn to juggle, because juggling is part of what you need to do on a tennis court. So, I don't know how to turn this thing off. Bye. Oh no, that's fun. It made it much more fun for me. So thank you. Okay. Bye.